Good morning and happy Sabbath, everyone. Welcome to our live stream for Sabbath School this morning. Damon is lucky because he was dropping some bars just before we're about to go live right
Just
now.
speaking the truth. That's all he was doing.
I'll leave Damon. Good morning and happy Sabbath, everyone. Welcome to our live stream for Sabbath School this morning. Share that with all of you, if he wants to share those bars a bit later on about how studious and how holy he is, but I'll leave that over to him. This morning, we're going to continue on to the next chapter of Patriarchs and Prophets, chapter 7. I'm going to leave our facilitator to talk a bit more in intro, a bit more about that. We've gone through 7 chapters, so this is the perfect chapter right now. Therefore, this is going to be the best Sabbath school and the most perfect Sabbath school ever been for Eastside. I want to thank our panelists, those who are joining us. I want to thank Don for facilitating and Damon for tuning in and being part of the conversation. Tyler, thanks for joining us. And Jason, thanks for joining us as well. So without further ado, I'm going to pray to open the Sabbath school, and then I'm going to hand over to our trusty facilitator, Don, who's going to lead the show. So let's pray, guys. Father, we just want to thank you so much for being such a good God, a great God. And right now, as we're about to go through Patriarchs and Prophets chapter 7, just the summary, I pray that your spirit can be with us as you unveil new truths to us as we go in this conversation. Thank you for being our God. In Jesus' name, amen. Over to you, Don.
All right. And I assume we have an hour. Is that right? Until 10:45, is that?
10:30, 10:40.
10:30, 10:40. Okay. No worries. Okay. Well, hey, guys, I appreciate you guys joining on us. What I was hoping for and what we were able to accomplish, and I'm very excited about this, is just kind of a younger perspective on what we're going to be doing this studying on. So if you can imagine, that's what we had Tyler. I actually had Gabby Boston too, because I wanted like a high school representative, but last minute she wasn't able to do it. But just got kind of a younger crowd, and we want to talk a little bit about what happened in this chapter. We'll do that in just a second. How are you guys doing? Jason, it's been a while, man. What's been new with you? What's been going on?
Just taking care of Casey. I'm very glad that you're considering me a younger person. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of crazy. Casey's birthday is coming up in August, so she's already turning 1, and so kind of leaps and bounds different from the last time most people have probably seen her. So excited for the day when we all get to kind of meet each other again, and she can start getting used to everybody again. So
yeah, that'd be cool. And speaking of taking care of kids, David, man, what's it like?
Been amazing and crazy, and just a lot of patience, very humbling experience. I will say everybody except for me and my dad have been sprayed or pooed on.
Yeah,
we have dodged it so far. So
that is funny. And then of course the young crowd. I am really thankful and grateful to say that there is no kid for Tyler, so we're very excited about that part. She is the kid, but growing up way too quick. I was excited, Tyler. Tyler being my daughter, I put the burden of having her come up with some questions too, but I always feel like she has such deep insights on things, and unusually she has been described as someone who can be 65 and 5 at the same time, like really innocent on one end and really kind of naive on one end, on the other hand, these deep thoughts. So really excited about it. And going through Patriarchs and Prophets. When I was going through this chapter, I have to admit that I copied it online and I put it on thing because I wanted to write notes. And I actually pasted it twice. So I thought it was really doubly as long as it ended up being. So I got to the end of it much quicker than I thought. The first thing I was doing is I just kind of went through kind of in order. And there's a part right over where Ellen Wright, she writes, they sought only to gratify the desires of their own proud heart, talking about the people at the time. And and they reveled in the scenes of pleasure and wickedness. This part I thought was really interesting, and I want to get your thoughts on it. Not desiring to retain God in their knowledge, they soon came to deny his existence. They adored nature in place of the God of nature. They glorified human genius and worshiped the work of their own hands, and taught their children to bow down to graven idols. Now, they did not want to acknowledge or remember God. But isn't it strange? I mean, why do you feel like they wanted then to create a God by creating idols? If they wanted to not have God, what would be your reason for why they thought that they needed to have an idol? And I'll start with Tyler. What do you think? Why would they think that?
I was wondering if it was due to their like sinful nature. So like they like doing their sinful things. They like the thought of like having someone protect them, but they didn't want to do like the roles that he has. So like they like thought like why not do a substitute, like a lesser substitute in my opinion. But I don't know, that's something.
Yeah, I was saying how does that morph? Damon, do you think it was like how does that start to happen? How does that morph into that?
You know, it's interesting because they said in the chapter that there are only a few generations after Adam. And so I think I counted through. And so from the time that Adam died to like around this time, it's not very long since people were living for centuries. And I just got to say, it's probably just sin doing its thing, doing its thing, because in that short time span, it just freaking got crazy. And I highlighted that part that you read because it talked about how they adorn nature and not like the God of nature. And so having that sense of being able to have something tangible is something that you can really like fall in love with. Like they said they did the same thing for gold and silver and the great wood trees and everything. It's like something that you can touch and have and something you can enjoy. And I feel like they just went all in to that and not really, they kind of lost sight. It's like, oh, well, this was God who actually put all this together. They just got so enamored with the actual thing.
Yeah, I can see that happening as well. There was a time in my life when, I didn't really want a God around myself. And you talk to people who really love nature. And in fact, I talked to someone who was saying that they went out and they went to Alaska and they took a look at it and it was so beautiful and they got this peace over them. And, and that wasn't God, that was just nature giving that to them. And there is that view. Jason, have you ever run into people who kind of did that, where they and interacted with them, or were you ever in that place and kind of experienced that? And then how would you respond to someone who said that type of thing?
I mean, I'm sure I've done it too, where I've kind of placed things in a position where I see it almost like elevating something to the level of God. And like when I was reading this part, and just thinking about it now with your question, like to me, it seems like it's convenience because, if I'm a farmer and the thing I care about is rain, I can build this thing that's going to give me rain, right? And I can pray to it for rain. And really the purpose is I'm going to build this thing that's going to serve me, as opposed to like God, which is what he calls us to serve them. And I feel like that's kind of the reason why it's just easier. You build this thing and it's meant really to do something for you. And I think we do that all the time with God. Like I go to God and I say, God, I need this thing. And I turn him into, all I care about is this one thing. This is all I'm going to pray about. This is all I need from you. And I don't see kind of the other aspects of the things he offers me, the things he asks of me. And so like nature is a wonderful, beautiful thing, but like if that's all we focus on and we see nature as God, like we're not seeing the full picture.
Yeah. And then when you look at the next thing, a little bit further on, she writes, men put God out of their knowledge and worship creatures of their own imagination. And as a result, they became more and more debased. The psalmist describes the effect produced upon the worshiper by the adoration of idols. He says, they that make them are like unto them, so that everyone that trusts in them. So they, in other words, the gods start to be more like you, instead of being that level, that measuring stick. And then it says, the law of the human mind is that by beholding we are changed. And to me, this COVID thing has been kind of crazy. As I look at that, by beholding we are changed, I have to consider in this time, what are the challenges we have? What grabs our attention and holds onto us? So that's what we're beholding. And everybody's on a different level and where they are in life. That's why it's such an interesting thing. So I guess what I would say is, what are our challenges now, where each of you guys are in your life? What is it that consumes your attention, consumes your time? And is that something that we need to be concerned about or mindful about? And I know, Jason, you just spoke, but I wanted to see what you had to think about that.
I mean, work and family probably are the two big things. And I think the trouble with it is those can be, it's easy to justify those as like good things to
They
consume,
are, yeah.
right? So we can say like, oh, you dedicate yourself to your family, or you dedicate yourself to being a really hard worker, or really dedicated to your job and stuff. And I think you can trick yourself into thinking I'm doing the right thing. But if you do it to the extent, where it becomes a detriment to yourself or your family, right? Then I think that's something that's easy to do.
Yeah, for sure. And I did that same thing. So Damon, look out, because that's what's coming your way. All those things. And it makes me believe that all things are possible to try to derail us away from God. Right. So Damon, I mean, you're dealing with your new baby and stuff like that. What does time look like for you?
Time is an abstract concept at this point. So such thing as time. I feel like Damon runs time and what that looks like. It's been feeding, burping, trying to get some sleep, trying to do work around that. It's been a lot of attempts of establishing boundaries and then just like letting it all go out the window. That's what it's been. But it has been very time consuming. Like Jason said, this time it's just like work and family, but it becomes just a lot more. And like he said, it sounds like it could be healthy, but it definitely gets to the point where it's becomes consuming, right?
Yeah. Absolutely, for sure. And Tyler, you're at a different place. We were all kind of at where you were at one point, but what is it like for you as far as your time and how that is spent?
I feel like I always could have time for it. Like even in college, I'm supposed to be studying for bio, and there's like, it feels like it's crazy, but I woke up at like 4 or 5 in the morning every day. So I always could have put in the time. I always had the time. I just I guess like the lazy part of myself, I just didn't feel like doing what I knew what I should be doing. And so I find that like just for people who are in my age, they're like, oh yeah, I'm so busy, blah, blah, blah. But actually we do always have time for him. We just choose not to put time for him in.
So you're making all us dads feel really guilty because I was okay. So I don't know on Sabbath school whether you're supposed to be quoting Kevin Hart, But I was watching a thing and he said, like, I hate babysitting. I hate babysitting. Okay, when this is how dads babysit. We sit there on the couch and we just listen for stuff. And I just remember, I totally know where you guys are coming from. I think when you're a family man and you're doing all that stuff, by beholding, we become what you quickly become as a dad. And that's, at first, that's not what you thought. That's not how you thought of yourself, right? But then over time, like now, when I think about who I am, that might be one of the first things I think of for me is, I'm a dad. Because that's where we put our time, that we put our effort. But then I'm also aware of the fact that the kids grow up and they leave, and then some people, their identity is so wrapped up in that all of a sudden you get to this place where you're lost. And Tyler, you're absolutely right. We all have the time. It's just for a little while, it just seems like if you have a little bit extra time, you want to be able to sleep, or you want to be able to eat with at peace, rather than having come on, eat, trying to feed the baby and all that kind of stuff. So I think it's powerful. And for me now, just being a different place than you guys, I'm finding that I do have a lot more times, but I've trained myself to follow the sports or follow the news and follow that type of stuff. So, I mean, I find that my mind has easily become distracted from God. And now what I'm trying to do is bring it back. So yeah, that's absolutely true. And that's the next question actually I got from Tyler. So it was a part about the whole polygamy thing. So you know how they start going into polygamy, and then they start not respecting marriages anymore. And if they want somebody, they just take them by force. And then not only are they doing that, but their property is not respected anymore and their rights. And if they want something, they're just going to take it. So somebody has a nice, I don't know, wooden rake back in the day. I don't know that they needed. They was going to take that, or a hoe, a digging hoe. Anyway, one of those things. So the question is this: with the destruction of marriage, property was not respected. So then how does marriage relate to property? So Damon, what do you think? How is that dynamic? Once marriage was destroyed, then property became not respected as well.
I'm gonna let Tyler go ahead and.
Okay, Tyler, you go first.
Oh, I had a conversation with my dad earlier about this. I was like, why is it that this came this way? Like, as soon as this came up, it was like everything kind of exploded in this area. And my dad was like, well, maybe it's because like if people can't even respect the boundaries of something like so important as your wife, then like the little stuff aren't as important. Like, well, if I can do that, then I can do this, and I can like push. Like, I already did that, so like the other stuff isn't as like bad to them. So it's like easy to do. I don't know. That's a guess.
Yeah, I suppose. What Jason and Damon doesn't want to say is, once you get married, she your property.
Well, I mean, for each other. I mean, like Damon is his wife's and his wife is his, kind of like.
There's Tyler again, smoothing it out for me.
I was like, oh, that doesn't sound very good.
That doesn't sound good. Yeah. I think yeah, marriage is such a big part. Our relationships is such a big part of our life. And once that's destroyed, it seems like it does open up a whole nother level, right? Jason, you were a single man before, and then how do you feel like things changed for you once you made that commitment and said, you're the one for me?
I mean, I think things change for the better because, if you're with the person that you're supposed to be with, which I am. I think you make each other better, you know. So I mean, it was really good for me. I think going back kind of to your other question though, I just had a thought about it.
Yeah.
There's a sentence in here about how like it's really about after the fall, men chose to follow their own sinful desires. So it's really just like living for yourself, right? That's what it became. So whether it was a woman or if it was property or if it was whatever, it just seems like live for yourself, take what you want, do whatever you want to do. And when I read it at first, it sounds like, well, what like barbaric kind of times way back in the past. But you know, if you look at the way we live today, a lot of it is living for ourselves, right? Like how do we make ourselves the most comfortable? How do we get whatever it is we want in this world? And so I think we're not as far off from what's described here as we, you know, would like to think we are.
Yeah, I think it's probably worse.
Yeah.
In there it talked about how at that time, even for different items and things, gold, silver, like all of that stuff was in abundance. And so I'm I'm trying to think about if I was living back then and I really liked having like a gold coated something in my house and like there was a bunch of gold just laying around. I'm like, well, I want that in gold and I want that in gold and I want that in silver, and just being completely frivolous with everything. And like Jason said, like your own self-desires, then it becomes like, well, I want that woman and I want that woman and she's taken, but I want that woman as well. And just
Who's taken?
exactly just go and take everything, and it's bad. Now things aren't in abundance and people still do that, and so I feel like it's gotten worse because yeah.
And I think too, like you know, when you think about marriage, like the commitment doesn't work if you're living for yourself. Like try marrying someone and then living only for yourself. It's not going to work. Like so I feel like that's kind of part of it, is like part of the commitment and part of what makes marriage great and what makes it work is also, you know, the love and the self-sacrifice for another person.
Well, Tyler, you're not married yet. I'm interested to see, now that we're talking about this, what you feel like are going to be the critical aspects of trying to make a marriage work.
So when I heard like I think the main theme was like you can't live for yourself. I guess I kind of thought of, I don't know if this is on topic or not, but this is of like Hosea. He had a wife, like God asked him to take a wife that was really just not faithful, and he kept like going back to her, taking care of her, and was living really more than himself. And even though like the stuff was hard for him to do, I feel like just because he wasn't living for just what he wanted, he could have just like left her, taken someone else instead and stuff. I feel like living for more yourself, I think marriage could be a good representation of God's love. Like the closer both of you are to God, the easier everything will be. And God's love is very selfless in that case. So marriage kind of has to be like, I see you and mom, and you're always asking mom what she wants, doing errands for her, and you, even if it's inconvenient. And so I see you too, and I think like this is how it's supposed to be, kind of thing. So I don't know, that's just my thought. Like
I'm doing something good.
Yeah, but like Hadabaji's grandpa's like suggestion, like if both of you are reaching for the same goal, which is Jesus, and both of you will come together and as a result.
Thank you. I can't help but to wonder that our culture is, just like you said, Jason, made that way. So it's going to be self-destructive because it is all about themselves. Tyler, have you ever heard of LL Cool J?
Nope. I haven't.
Oh my gosh, I'm not a young person then.
I don't. But then again, I didn't know who the Kardashians were until like high school.
Yes, that's one of my great parenting successes.
Yeah. I was like, who are the Kardashians? And they're like, what?
Yes. The reason I say it is there's a culture, especially among men, where you just kind of, you are more of a man if you can just kind of take whatever you want. And I just remember LL Cool J did that song, you know, I'm that type of guy. Is that what it's called? I'm the type of guy. Anyway, let's not even talk about it. But basically, he's bragging on how he just takes other men, you know, women.
Yeah, you get all the girls. You have all the girls. You got all the stuff. I'd say there's definitely different parts of the country that are more focused on that than others. I think you can tell, like maybe you visit and like one state and they're kind of rude and they're just, you know, going through they care about what they need to do versus other places which might be really cordial, really nice. Like, oh, do you need help? And you know, I don't know why it's like that in certain states. That's so interesting.
So I guess the question is, I mean, if the world is teaching us that, and it sounds good and all, if you're the type of person who can get everything they want, right? You're a, you know, Donald Trump, and you're rich and you just take whatever it is that you want, that kind of thing. How do you talk to someone like that to say, why would you want to give that up and follow a God who is telling you to have restraint? You know, if you've ever met someone who said, or an atheist or someone that said, well, you know, why would I give up this? This is the good life. Why do I want to give that up? That's the big question. How do you answer that? So Tyler, okay, the hands up already. That's why I have her. She's always got it.
Okay, first, I believe in the concept which I have been taught by actually my dad, that you can't change anyone but yourself. So I can't really change them, or like I can tell them in my perspective, I think I choose to be a Christian. I choose to be Adventist because it makes sense to me. I choose to not, let's say, eat pork or drink because it's healthier. Everything that the Bible preaches or whatever ultimately benefits your life in so many ways. The Sabbath, because you have the day of rest, you have less stress. Because you have less stress, you live longer. So like, if they're asking like, I'm living the best life I am like possible, I'm like, are you really? So like, you're having this fun. Like my dad, like he would preach to me about studying because I didn't want to study as a kid, and he said this little bit of pain for this like life, like longer like result of happiness. So they're kind of exchanging that little happiness for like other consequences later down in their life. So I'm like, are you trading one thing for another? Are you really living the quote unquote best life when you're actually destroying, or not destroying, but like hurting your life in other ways?
Well, you're kind of young, Tyler, so you haven't had and happily so, the experience of making some bad mistakes and deciding that you're going to leave from God. I don't really know, Jason, whether you or Damon, if you guys have been to that place. Were you guys ever at the place where you guys were in all-out rebellion of God, and so that you could give that perspective?
Not about like out and out rebellion of God, but you know, I have an experience which is probably pretty similar to most Adventists who grew up Adventists, which is Adventism was explained to me as a series of rules and laws when I was growing up. And so it was really like, don't play video games on Sabbath, don't eat this certain stuff, don't fill your car with gas on a certain, you know, like that was really kind of how it was explained to me growing up. And you're right. I think if you talk to the person who seemingly has everything, and they have the perspective of, why would I give that up to follow these rules? They're never going to want to do that. I think I totally agree with Tyler that you kind of have to look beyond that to see what's the reason behind these things, right? They're not rules for the sake of rules. This is actually like a purpose for like making our own lives better, making us healthier, making us closer to God, and all these things. And so really it's just like seeking this relationship with God that's the most important thing. And so for me, like, I think the rebellion came when I was like, these are dumb rules. Like, why am I following these rules? Why am I not eating this? Or why am I, not watching something until the sun goes down on some random day? And so I think it wasn't until like I got older when I started to kind of question and try to think about what's the purpose behind all of these things. And the interesting thing is, like, when you start to look at it, then you notice like there is a reason, right? They're not arbitrary. There is some purpose behind it. And I would say for a bunch of things, I'm still like struggling with in terms of just figuring out why and applying it to my life. But like, I think that's kind of something that's changed from me when I was little, where I was just, I'm a rule follower. That's just kind of my nature. So I was just like, I'll just do it because that's what I'm supposed to do. But now, when you get older, you don't want to do that. So you really kind of need to understand the reason behind it to really apply it to your life.
I'm a rule follower too, so I hear that. But I was at that place. Damien, you came up from a totally different background. You weren't raised Adventist. That wasn't kind of your thing. Is that right?
Yeah, no, I wasn't raised Adventist. I was raised in the church. And so, I mean, I don't think I haven't gotten to a place of all out rebellion, but it's definitely been to a place where it's like, I know I definitely shouldn't be doing this. And I'm still doing it anyways. And so that is rebellion, but it's also not one of those like, screw you, God. It wasn't one of those. It was one of those like, I'm just find myself keep giving in, even though I need to like not do this thing. And so I was just always thankful that like my heart hadn't hardened, and I just said, screw it all. But yeah, kind of what Tyler was saying, like people living their best life. I had a conversation with my brother. We're talking about going on vacations and our ideal vacation and the things that we like to do, because at the end we both agreed that we didn't want to have to take a vacation from our vacation when we were done, because a lot of people, they go on vacation and they try to live their best life, and for them living their best life is having all of these drinks and eating all of this crappy food and not getting any type of sleep or at least consistency. And so they're living this best life. And then when they come back home, they need to take like 3 days off and recover. And it's like, that's not a very fun or at least productive way that I would like to recharge and be on vacation. And doing that kind of stuff for an extended period of time, it's not sustainable. So, I mean, people struggle doing it for a week or 2 weeks. Think about if you're trying to do that for your entire life for 10 years, 20 years. It's not very sustainable. And I believe most people know that. At least they get to a certain point where they realize that this is not very sustainable. This is not very healthy. And this just isn't really doing it for me anymore. Because even with money, like there's a lot of things you could get with money, but then even a lot of rich people realize at a certain point, it's like, you don't get that same thrill and that same high from it. And so like Jason and Tyler were saying, that some of the things that you start doing, like we can't change people, but God changes people. And so if you model and if you have conversations and are an example, and people just seek out God, then they realize like, well, this is actually better for me if I do this, and they start getting that fulfillment.
Love it. That's really, and it's so true. And I think that's the thing, is on the outside, it might look like they're having a great time, but something is hurting on the inside. And we have to recognize that. Jason, I love what you said, and I just kind of want to go back to that a little bit. You were talking about how it was presented to you as God as this set of rules. And don't you think that's what's wrong with Christianity nowadays? They're trying to say being a Christian means these set of rules. Isn't it more than that? Isn't it more than that? How would you describe that? Go ahead, Tyler.
Sorry, I was like, well, I know the topic's move on, but I guess I can answer this one too.
Go to the other one. What you were gonna say? Go ahead.
Okay, so the past topic where Damon was talking about him and his brother and all that stuff. I was like thinking about also the factor of like some people do things because it's like easier for them. Like let's say you want to be fit, but like in order to be fit, you got to go like running, you got to do weights, you got to eat differently and all that stuff, and it's so much easier to like eat what's around, like McDonald's, or like just like eat like a bunch of rice or ice cream that's in your freezer or whatever. So I was like thinking like not only does it like seem like it's like a set of rules, or like it's it doesn't really help you in any way. It's kind of like, it seems difficult because to change for the better, like a lot of changes that you want to do that's good for you is hard. Whether you want to get good grades on your like ACT, you want to like be fit, you want to be like a better person in general, it's hard to like change that and take this like look at yourself for these parts that you like may or may not like, and like exchanging them for something, not exchanging them, but like changing for the better. Anyway, what was the other question?
So the other one is God just a set of rules? And how do you then present God to someone who doesn't know it? If he's not a set of rules, which I think probably we all agree that that's not the all-encompassing feature of what God is, then how do you then explain that to anybody, what he is?
Oh, okay. So I think my dad or my family has done a really good job at explaining to me that God isn't about rules. And to my understanding, this is what it is. If you love someone, let's say I love my dad, and he tells me, don't go and touch the stove because it's going to burn yourself. Because I love my dad. I trust my dad that he knows what's best for me. I'm not going to touch the stove. Not that he was going to like be pissed off at me, be like, why the heck you touched the stove? I'm going to like punish you now. He's like, why did you do that? You hurt yourself, kind of thing. So it's in the aspect of, because you love someone and because you're at this point where you trust someone at this level, then it's something that you do it because you love the person, not because they're gonna like kill you if you do it, not because they're gonna like hate you for the rest of your life because you made a mistake, but it's like in the aspect of like they love you, they want what's best for you, so like because you love them you're gonna do something. Or like let's say like your wife doesn't like it when you do this, you're gonna avoid doing it because you love them. It's just my understanding.
I think to that point though, to someone who doesn't know God, like how do you get them to trust God, right? Because you know, obviously you trust your dad, and you know he's built that, you know, relationship with you throughout your entire life. But for someone who doesn't have that relationship with God, you can't ask them to trust the rules because they won't. They're not there yet, right? So I think that when we're talking about God to people, it's really more about the relationship as opposed to, you know, what you do. And once you learn to trust Him, then that's when you start going to God and asking for guidance and asking for advice. And then He's like, here's all the advice and here's all the guidance. Here's how you live your life.
Yeah.
Here's how you make the best of all these things, right? And so I think the challenge is really presenting God as someone who loves them and wants a relationship with them, and that's really the basis of it. Because if you do look at the rules, it's never going to convince anybody to say like, you know, or they can follow the rules and not need God, right? Like there's a lot of health experts out there who actually follow like the Adventist health message, right? So not a lot of meat, they don't drink, they don't smoke, they don't do all that stuff, and like they can follow all those rules and be in excellent health and reap the virtues of that, but totally not have any relation to God, right? And so I think it's really boils down to like, do you know who God is? Do you have a relationship with Him where you can trust Him? And then at that point, then these aren't rules. This is really just loving guidance, kind of like Tyler was saying. This is for, you know, something that God has shared with us for our own good, and because He loves us and He wants to see us thrive.
Damon, could you respond to any of that? What are your thoughts on that subject?
Yeah, I mean, thinking about how to introduce people to God, you know, it's really hard to come in. Like we know that God wants what's best for us. And so the analogy that Tyler used about the trusting the author for other people to understand that is good and important. I think that initially, you know, a lot of that stuff happens through relationships and communication and connecting with people. And so when you start doing things a certain way or not doing things a certain way, and when you always have pretty clear and good insight and a certain level of just the way you move is a little different. Like people on earth, we're naturally attracted to like things of this earth. And so they will be attracted to us, and they might not see that this is God, because we don't like to see that God's behind everything. Just like they talk about in this chapter with nature, we become so adorned by the nature, we forget that, oh, this is God that did all of this. When we connect with people, they see that in us, and they might see it's like, oh, well, I'm super thought and kind of, I'm curious about this Tyler person. Like, she just seems to move a little different. There's something about her. And then it's our job to kind of move out the way, like, in another time, so they can be like, it's not me. This is actually God. I'm doing this. But that trust happens over time with relationships, and then just God doing his thing.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's great insight. It's about us modeling that love to other people. But God is still about those rules. He absolutely is. And I want to read a passage to you with this view of God, and see, how do we reconcile this? At the very end of this chapter, Ellen White writes, when the reason of philosophy has banished the fear of God's judgments, when religious teachers are pointing forward to long age of peace and prosperity, and the world are absorbed in their round of business and pleasure, planting and building, feasting and merriment, rejecting God's warnings and mocking his messengers, then it is that sudden destruction cometh upon them, and they shall not escape. And this whole story of Noah is talking about him warning people, look, the world is coming to an end. And in fact, when it's described as the waters come flooding in, as the people run, they start strapping themselves to animals, right? Strapping their kids to strong animals. They figure that this animal's strong, they'll survive. I'll strap them to, or they strap themselves to trees. Everything they did, it was vividly pointed out that it didn't work and they're going to die. That's part of God's message too. Look, you need to heed my warnings, because this is what's coming, and it's coming onto you. Now, how do you reconcile that with this loving God, this relationship? How do you do that at the same time? Do we preach this message to people? Do we let people know this is coming? Because now we're not talking about that loving God anymore. Now we're talking about just which way do we go, or do we just try to push that aside and let's not talk about this? How do we address that truth?
I would kind of go back to the dad analogy. It's just really easy. Like they say that, like, a love of parents, like a love, love of God in a way, like in a small way. So like a dad has, yes, a loving aspect and loving thing, but like I don't know if it's just me, but my dad has always gone through with his word. He said, Tyler, if you do this, I'm gonna do this, and he's never pulled back if he says something. So it's just kind of like, yeah, like he's loving, but there's things that he like has to do. He has to follow through in his word. It's like, it's hard to say that like this aspect of like wiping all these people out is like loving in a way, part of his loving God and stuff. But I guess it's like to think about it in that way, because I know I had an experience where a music teacher, she like went up in my face. I was doing a voice lesson. She's like, so if God is so loving, if God is so wonderful, then why is it that he wipes all these people out? Why is it that he like goes to this garden, like the garden that Israelites were promised, and like kill all those people, those women, those children? Like, how can you explain that? And I was so at a loss of words. Like, how do I explain that?
Yeah.
It's really hard. I can say that like you have to like study and you have to know God to like understand. I know that my one of the pastors who was explaining to me, it was actually like when they say like they decimated all the like these people, when they like killed all these people, they actually meant like killing the leader. So it kind of, I guess it made a little more sense to me, but still like explaining that aspect of God to people, where he made this whole like community into salt. it's a little hard.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough for you. Do you guys have any thoughts on how do you reconcile that?
I mean, we see it's easy to see the story as God taking action, like vengeful action, maybe even on people, but really, we understand it as taking action against sin. And then also just in the context of the whole story, like how long did it take Noah to build the ark? And during that whole time, trying to convince people, trying to proselytize, and trying to get people to understand the message. Even with miraculous works, right? With the animals coming in 2 by 2, like it's as in your face as it possibly could be. So it's not like there was no opportunity. And then in the chapter, it also talks about like even once people like realized, oh, I was wrong, and it's raining and everything is flooding, that there was actually still no true repentance in their hearts. This is all reaction of fear, right? And so I think when you think about it that way, it's not a vengeful God who is like, merciless and uncaring and unloving and things like that. It's really who is doing stuff to us. It is really us doing stuff to ourselves is really what it ends up being. That's how I reconcile it for myself.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Damon, any thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with what they both said. I mean, so God has this plan. God had this idea of what, like, Eden, right? He had Eden, and Eden was there, and it was great, and then it wasn't there anymore. And so God's like, well, this was a super great thing, and I wanted everybody to be able to enjoy and take part in it. And there are certain things that have to be maintained in order for this stuff to happen. And I'm giving you chance after chance after chance after chance after chance to show that, that you're choosing to do these things, because this is what it will ideally be like. For example, like in heaven, I think that in heaven, everybody's vegan. And so if you're like trying to eat a bunch of hamburgers and stuff like that, you're not going to enjoy heaven. It's just not going to be the place for you. And so if you're not really going to enjoy that, then it's kind of like, well, you don't even want to be here. So God would just like, you know what, I've given you opportunity. I'm telling you what's going to happen. Like, you have hundreds of years, you have thousands of years. There will be a time where this decision and this thing is going to happen. And he like pleads with us. And then if we choose not to, then it's like, well, you know what? You're not even going to enjoy this amazing thing that I have going on anyway. So that's how I
see ya.
So.
All right, Tyler. Yes.
So when he was talking, they were talking about what they said. I remembered this line from the chapter. It said, had the antediluvians, I guess they were the people at that time, had believed the warning and repented of the evil deeds, the Lord would have turned aside his wrath as he and afterward, as he did with Nineveh, kind of thing. He would have like the flood would have never happened, I guess, kind of thing. And so kind of like I was kind of agree with you guys, like, yeah, God gives us so many chances. He like tries, and also like I remember talking to Dad, like, why can't everyone go to heaven? He was explaining to me, like, I think that like having like sinful people, because like sin inside them would kind of pulls away from the like good, and it hurts them. Like for them to be in heaven, it would be painful. It would be torture for them to be in heaven. And so by God not having them in heaven is actually an act of, in a way, love, because he doesn't want them to be in that kind of pain. It'd be terrible for them. So yeah, I was just adding on to that.
Yeah, love it. Well, we're coming to the close as far as just not having a lot of time, and there was one last thing that I wanted to cover before we're at the end, and that's where just talk about Noah's faithfulness and how he was blessed because of it. And I guess what I want to talk about is the fact that God told him, knowing what was going to happen, God told him, I want you to minister to these people, not one of who you will save, for 120 years. You know, so Pastor Sam, you can hear this. Is it, you know, who knows that this might be something that God's asking you to do. I want you to give it your all. I want you to minister. I want you to love these people. I want you to minister them for 120 years without any fruit, not saving a single one. Now, God knew that Noah was not going to save anybody except for his own children, right? His own family. And he still asked them for 120 years, I want you to minister. And so I guess the question is, in our ministry, it feels like that sometimes. In our ministry, it feels like, are we really even making a difference? And all of us have our own ministry. Pastor Sam said, thank you, Don. I won't expect any fruit from Eastside. But it does feel like that at sometimes, like, you know, and then how do we keep on being faithful to that task God asks us to do, even knowing that that might be the case? Can we still continue doing what seems like a fruitless work, and how do we do that?
Well, I don't think it was fruitless because, like, when you read in the chapter 2, it says, while Noah was giving his warning message to the world, his works testified of his sincerity. It was thus that his faith was perfected and made evident. And so maybe God was making him do it, not for the other people, but for himself.
That's a
So I would say that's
great,
not fruitless.
yes.
You know,
yes.
like, yeah.
How do you do that though? How do you keep going when you feel like you're going nowhere? How do you keep doing that? Damon, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, thinking about Noah, you know, I don't know if he felt that it was completely fruitless, because Ellen White talks about that people did kind of hear him. They weren't really like truly listening to what he was trying to say. They were kind of hearing him a little bit, and that probably felt like he was making some type of like that there might be a little something. So he had hope, and I think God knows that we need to have that hope, and that we're not perfect creation, so our faith is not perfect either. And so he gives signs and gives little nuggets to encourage us and keep going. And even when all the animals like come from all across the freaking place to come into the ark, like that's a spectacular sight. Like, so when you see something like that and you're doing that, you're like, okay, I'm aligning with this guy, so I know I can do something right. So that's things like that is encouraging. But even when they got on the ark and it took like 7 days, it was I don't know, but yeah, Noah's faith was like tested super hardcore right then too. So like Jason was saying, it elevates our faith, but I think God does know that it's really nice when we get some nuggets and some reminders that we are aligned. God doesn't keep us totally in the dark and saying it's like, just follow me and like give us no kind of thing. Even with Moses, he gave him a burning a bush. Like, he's like, okay, here's something that you could kind of work with. And, you know, that's a little tangible. So
yeah, absolutely. Tyler, any thoughts on that?
So it's about like how to go on when it seems pretty hopeless. I kind of agree with the like kind of doing it for your own faith too, not just for other people. Also, yeah, they did say that like some people did believe in him at times. Like first they're like, oh, they did it out of fear, not out of genuine. Some people were genuine and they were bullied out of believing. And you know, it's at least they did something. At least you know that you tried. Like if you had a kid and they were gonna do something bad and you're trying to like, don't do this, and you're you know, and they end up making the mistake anyway. You still love them, but you're like, at least you tried to warn them. It's better than doing nothing and just watching them just without warning, without knowing, you know. At least you gave them like a fair shot. in a way.
Absolutely. Well, we need to come to a close. I do want to go back to that thought, though, that we talked about earlier. By beholding, we become. And I think if Noah's eyes were on how many people he was saving, which is such a thing for churches now. Like, what are your numbers? Even the conference, they're asking, what are your numbers? What is this? Are you growing? If our eyes are on that, then there's no way we're going to sustain it. If that's where Noah was, then I don't think he would have been able to sustain. He wouldn't have been able to do that if his eyes were on that. But I think by beholding, we become, and I think he grew fruit because his time wasn't wasted, because that was time that he was spending with God. And I think he was taking that experience and sharing it with everybody else, hoping that somebody will listen, but he still was gaining from that. And in this crazy world that we're all sharing in right now, I mean, hopefully we can learn from that, what we need to do is, even when we're tired, even when we're busy, we need to make that time for God, just like we did in this time. And you guys appreciate the time you made for this. But I think we're blessed. I think we're blessed when we do that. And that's a great lesson that Noah could give us. All right, let's bow our heads for prayer and we can close. Lord Father, we just thank you so much for these stories, for the truth that you don't hold back from us, from the obvious lessons to be learned, that it comes down to we need more time with you. And we need our faith to be in you. And in order to have that faith, we need more time with you, Lord. Thank you for Noah and for this plan of salvation you've given us. Thank you for this time that we could spend and reflect on you and your goodness and your love, and allow us to just bask in that relationship for the rest of this day, for the rest of this week, and for the rest of our lives. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thanks, guys. I remember that we're having our Zoom church service at 11:15. Y'all are part of a group. And so I think they're sending, or sent you a link, or they're going to. So look for that and log in at 11:15, and we'll get to see each other just a little bit more later. Okay. Appreciate it. Happy Sabbath, everybody. You guys take